In the United States, American television company CBS, its chief, Les Moonves, just hours after 6 more women accused the veteran television executive of sexual misconduct. Pulitzer Prize winner Ronan Farrow reported the latest allegations in New Yorker magazine. They included allegations that Moonves tried to force women to perform oral sex and retaliated when women turned down his advances. Moonves acknowledged relations with 3 of the women but said they were consensual, adding he had never used his position to hurt the careers of women. The resignation is effective immediately. Now that Moonves' fate at CBS has been decided, the unanswered question remains whether he will still walk away with a hefty severance package. Right now on the table, $120 million. Our panel is here to talk about whether severance is appropriate. In Ottawa, Tim Powers, Vice Chairman at Summa Strategies. From Toronto, Pam Palmater, Indigenous Chair at Ryerson University. And joining us from Vancouver is Charles Adler, host of Charles Adler Tonight. All right, Tim, let me start with you. Nothing has been proven in a court of law. Should he walk away with $120 million in his pocket?
Well, he can be a despicable human being. There are a lot of people who are. He can be subject to a lot of allegations, but I think he has to go through a process here, and I gather CBS has laid one out that will see an investigation, that will see a review of all of this. Then part of that, I assume, will look at his contract, Carole, which likely has morality clauses and behavioral clauses. And if going through that process and the investigation, they find out that he is in fact in violation of the contract and guilty of those allegations, then no, he shouldn't get his severance. But the process has to exist, and as we've seen, and go through its machinations, and as we've seen here in Ottawa with 2 high-profile New Democrats, the allegations weren't borne out by the investigation. So investigations and process matter, no matter how despicable we all may find the story.
Pam, what do you think as a lawyer?
Yeah, well, I mean...
And a woman.
Yeah, well, clearly, I think it's important first that they're taking these allegations very seriously. We've had, I mean, the whole Me Too movement is about women not being believed, not even getting to go through a complaint process, either, you know, through the police calling it unfounded or through corporations and businesses just not investigating these things. So I think that's an important first step. And secondly, with so many allegations coming forward, I think it's good that CBS is actually going to do an investigatory process before they make any decisions around money, because the most important thing is to get at the truth and what happened and whether how many of these allegations are true, if any. I think that's the most important part. Of course, if they turn out to be valid, then he shouldn't get severance. Of course he shouldn't. That would be unjust enrichment. You would be enriching someone for having worked for a period of time that he shouldn't have been working had there been an ability to bring those allegations ahead sooner.
Okay, Charles, what do you think?
So I'll throw out the caveat, of course, that nothing has been proven. But one thing has been proven, and I think we ought to focus on that. Ronan Farrow, who wrote the piece for New Yorker, is highly credible. And if it wasn't a highly credible piece, we wouldn't be talking about this in the first place. And since it is highly credible and likely that there is a there, it would be very, very difficult for CBS, from a public relations perspective, to give him severance. It also doesn't do Moonves any good to take $120 million severance if he's about to be sued by a number of people, and of course if he's about to be prosecuted. Once again, we'll throw out the caveat, nothing has been proven, but there's a lot there. And there's a lot there that would stop CBS lawyers from wanting to cut him a check for $120 million.
Yeah, we have a tweet from Rachel Bloom, the co-creator and star of the other CBS show, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Let's take a look at that board. She says, as an employee of CBS, I would just like to say that Les Moonves should be fired without getting a effing dollar. She goes on to tweet, the actions described in this article are those of sexual assault, and shame on anyone else in the corporation who knew about his crimes. Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, look, I agree Ronan Farrow is a very credible person and is known to do his work, but I think Charles touches on something else that's fascinating here, and I'll go at it from 2 angles. symbolism, right? The biggest element of this, beyond the nature of the allegations, is the symbolism. So if, for example, this will be an interesting one, Mr. Moonves is found through the investigative process not really to have done anything wrong. There may have been some appropriate things, but they don't verge into the areas of harassment, etc. And he does get, say, 100 of that 120 million. The symbolism of a powerful, white, old media executive getting money after these allegations have been made in an era where powerful white men have been proven in other cases to abuse their behavior will not be good from a commercial perspective from CBS. The other element of symbolism which has got me baffled, if Mr. Moonves is not guilty and CBS is isn't too worried, why have they already paid $20 million? I mean, that's the worst sort of PR in all of this. $20 million has already been set aside to go to different Me Too movement undertakings. To me, that is an admission of guilt of some sort, and they both haven't really thought that well through, from my perspective.
Do you think that the lesson is being learned not only by top executives, but by any male in a position of power over women who might want to try to extort sex from them in exchange for perks at work? Pam, what do you think?
I don't know that the lesson has necessarily been learned, in a widespread way. I think there's been very prominent individuals who are learning that lesson very rapidly. I don't know that there's been a massive corporate shift in male attitudes. I mean, if we know nothing else, let's just pretend we'll never know what the results of the investigation are. What we know is he admitted to at least 3 alleged consensual relationships with people who were far less powerful than he, with whom he worked. Already that's a power imbalance, and it can't do anything but impact their careers and them as individuals. So, I mean, we know that from basic, anti-sexual harassment training that you take in any HR course. And so just the fact that he's done at least that is enough to say he has hurt these women, and he has entered into that that sphere of the power imbalance and sexual relations, and that alone is very problematic. And I can see why he's resigned, and also why CBS is taking this seriously.
Well, he married one of his employees, in fact.
Well, he didn't marry them all.
No, he did not.
Right?
Not from Utah. That's
I guess there's a law against that.
Charles, what do you think? Do you think that men are learning the lesson here about how to behave when they're in power?
I think men are being told that if you want to have consensual relationships, have them outside the building. I mean, I think that's becoming increasingly clear to men. And for men who aren't picking up on that information, I mean, I just have to look them in the eye and say, what does it take? I mean, I think that all of this is a very, very obvious message that you want to have sexual relationships with people outside your marriage, or even if you are married, regardless. I mean, don't do it inside the company, because if you have to at some point say, oh, no, it really was consensual, you look bad.
And in some cases, it's also about power, isn't it? It's not about love. It's not about pursuing a relationship. It's about having power over somebody. Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, for sure it is. I mean, although you're not going to change immediately, though you would think the shock of what has happened should do that for a lot of people in their behavior, but you're not going to change what's happened over, the last 100 or so odd years. It is certainly not strange in the media industries, the political industries, the sports industries, the legal industries, to have people who work together ending up in romantic relationships. But you do have to be more cognizant of, as Pam pointed out, the power dynamic, how you justify that relationship to others, and how, when that relationship goes astray, each party is protected from grievances or heartbreak that can have a damaging effect on the rest of their lives. You're not going to stop people from falling in love with each other or stop people from being attracted to each other, but there's a whole new set of rules you better be aware of.
Pam, what do you think? Do you think this is merely about people falling in love and having a relationship, or a power dynamic?
No, I mean, this is clearly a power dynamic. I mean, we clearly haven't learned from President Clinton. President Clinton has a massive power dynamic with his intern. I mean, you can't in any situation consider that to be the same level of consent as two adults from two different spheres, not in the same building, you know, going out and falling in love, for example. You're talking about situations of power that have an impact on consent, because men in power have historically had many different ways of letting it be known to female workers who work well under them the consequences of saying yes or no to their advances. Sometimes it's verbal, sometimes it's by retaliatory actions, and that's the problem. Are you really getting consent with an intern when you're the President of the United States? And the same can be said here for a man as powerful as this man was.
All right. Tim Powers, Pam Palmater, and Charles Adler, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Carol.
Good night.